Thank you for joining Direct Women's webinar on top tips for building board-ready connections. My name is Kelsey Velma, and I will be your technical moderator behind the scenes. I am the Program and Marketing Manager here at Direct Women, and I'm excited to be hosting this session. Before we get started, I'd like to run through a few housekeeping notes. You should all be able to see the screen right now and hear my voice. The phone lines, however, are muted, so although all of you can hear me, we cannot hear you. That said, you can still ask questions, and we encourage you to do so. At the top right of your screen is the GoToWebinar panel. Just open the console, type a question, and hit submit. Feel free to submit questions at any time. Today's webinar will be approximately 1 hour with 40 minutes of content followed by 15 minutes for Q&A. Our speakers' biographies are available for download in the handout section of the GoToWebinar console. Lastly, there will be a short survey at the end of the webinar that we hope you will complete. It is only 4 questions and should take no more than 2 to 3 minutes tops. With that, I would like to turn it over to Julie North for a brief introduction. Julie?
Thank you, Kelsey, and congratulations to you and your colleagues for seamlessly transitioning to a virtual event structure at this challenging time. Cravath is proud to have supported Direct Women for many years now. Participation on corporate boards is a key route towards business leadership, and one that for too long women have not been able to take full advantage of. There are many reasons for that, all of which we should be determined to fix, but one of the reasons is that many women lawyers don't have guidance on how to take the first steps towards building and leveraging connections in a way that demonstrates the value they would bring to a board. That's the theme of today's discussion. Cravath believes firmly in Direct Women's mission of increasing the representation of women lawyers on corporate boards, because we know it's as beneficial to companies as it is to the women joining them. I hope you all find this panel useful, and I look forward to hearing from our speakers. And I'll now turn things over to our moderator, Michelle Banks.
Hello, everyone. I apologize you won't be able to see me today. We had a technical glitch that came up today that wasn't a part of our rehearsal, so we are flexing yet again. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar on top tips for building board-ready connections. I am Michelle Banks, and I am a senior advisor at Barker Gilmore. I specialize in coaching women general counsel. Before that, I was general counsel and board secretary at Gap Inc. I also proudly serve on the Direct Women Board of Directors. For more than a decade, Direct Women has focused on fulfilling its mission to prepare women lawyers to serve on corporate boards of directors. Our work includes identifying highly qualified women attorneys and helping them best position themselves for service on the boards of major corporations. Through our programming, Direct Women helps to create a pipeline of women legal leaders who can effectively serve in corporate boardrooms. I have personally witnessed the positive impact of adding 4 women to a board while serving as corporate secretary at Gap. It's now my privilege to have panelists Abby Alderman, Michelle Coleman-Mays, and Marla Persky join us today for this webinar, and it is my pleasure to introduce them. Michelle is an experienced general counsel and board secretary who has made time to serve on 2 consecutive public company boards while working full-time. Marla is a retired general counsel like me. She was also a board secretary as well, and she is now a professional director. She has served on the boards of private angel-funded, VC-backed, and family-owned boards, as well as on 2 public company boards. Abby is CEO of BoardSpan, a company seeking to make boards better by supporting corporations with their board candidate recruiting, as well as other services such as board evaluation. So let's get started. I want you to hear from our panelists. I would like to start by following in the footsteps of Simon Sinek and start with why. Marla and then Michelle and finally Abby, I would appreciate if you would each start by sharing with us why you serve on a corporate board or want to help others do so.
Sure. Thank you, Michelle. And I'm sorry that we're not seeing you in person. At the very heart of it all, why I serve on corporate boards is because I really enjoy business. I enjoy creating and discussing strategy and giving advice, which of course as a lawyer I did for 30 plus years. The great thing about board service is that I'm involved in the understanding and the pressure testing of business strategies, but I'm not responsible for implementing them. And that's like taking off a heavy winter coat. It's really terrific. And I also enjoy relying on my past experiences in providing advice to the organizations on whose boards I sit. And finally, I think that I can make a difference in those organizations. I help them grow, plan, live up to their missions, and to operate in a values-based framework. So that's why I serve on boards. I believe strongly that boards have got to be reflective of the shareholders. And that's why I am really involved in helping women and people of color get on boards so that our boards can be far more reflective of shareholders, of customers, and of employee bases.
So Double L, I think I totally agree with what Marla just said, so I could say ditto, but I'll add just a few things. I think that it's a time when you want to see the communities reflected, and as a role model, you want to send the signal that folks who look like me should and can be in the room where it happens. So I think that's extremely important. I also think it's important to be able to add your skills and your knowledge to whomever it is you've decided to join, because we're living in disruptive times. And one of the things that most companies have to avoid against is groupthink. So if you can have an eclectic board, I think there's a greater possibility that you won't fall into that trap. So again, I echo what Marla said, and I wanted to add those 2 points.
Thanks, Michelle and Marla. I'm happy to clean up on this one, and welcome to everybody who's tuning into this webinar. When I was asked to think about why it is that we do what we do at BoardSpan, it pretty quickly went to our vision statement, because that says it all for us. We see highly effective boards as adding distinctive value to all of their constituents. So a little bit of what Michelle and Marla just referred to, but think about those constituents, and thankfully the broader definition that we've all embraced: employees, customers, business partners, the community, and shareholders. So there's 2 core elements to what makes a highly effective board. One is who's sitting around the table, and the other is what information they have available to them. And so for us to be true to our own vision, which is effective boards add value to the companies they serve, that's exactly why BoardSpan exists. When we started the company a little over 5 years ago, we saw a real white space in helping boards excel and helping them deliver their best. So it's a little bit of the invoking John Kennedy, not what your country can do for you, but you can do for your country. And that's a theme that you might hear from the 3 of us as we go through this panel, what you can do what you'll bring to a board in your board service.
So Abby, I'd love to stick with you for a moment. Best practice in building board-ready connections takes some planning. What is your advice on how to get started networking and building relationships towards this goal?
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. So my first piece of advice is to help people help you. If you want someone to recommend you and open doors for you, you need to make your story clear to them. Be succinct, and I hate to say it, but spoon feed it. Let them know the distinctive value that you feel you can bring to a board. It's important that you don't expect them to do that work for you. They may know you, they might have worked with you and seen you in action, but to do that extra work of figuring out what your superpowers are and how you best position yourself, don't put that on them. You sort of have to own that. My second piece of advice is to ask people for their help explicitly. Don't presume that they know that you want to get on the board. Reach out to them with a specific request, which means you need to do your own homework about the person you're going to ask for help. Whether you're asking for a referral or time to help you brainstorm ideas or even a direct introduction to somebody else, the more you make it relevant to them and don't make it a sort of a generic or commodity ask, the more inclined they'll be to help you. I'm not supposed to be advertising BoardSpan, and our service is free, so don't consider this an advertisement, but I should tell you that some of these tools and ways to think about your own positioning and ways to use your network are all available for free at our website. So again, not a commercial message, but more of just a set of tools to help you.
Thanks, Abby. Marla, a lot of people suggest nonprofit board service as a stepping stone to corporate board service. Did nonprofit board service play a role for you in obtaining your first corporate board seat? And would you recommend that experience to others as an initial place to start to make board connections?
Actually, there was no role that nonprofit service played in getting my first board position or any of my board positions, to be honest with you. It's networking and it's connections that have gotten me all of my board, I'm talking about for-profit board seats, also true for my nonprofit board seats. So when people ask, should I join a nonprofit board in order to get me ready to be on a board or to help me make the connections to get on a board? My response back is that not all boards, nonprofit boards, are the same, and your board service experience won't be the same. So there's tiny little boards like community boards where you have to actually roll up your sleeves and do the work because there's not a paid staff. Hard to see how that's going to help prepare you for board service, because if you're going to be on a nonprofit board, it is nose in and fingers out, which is the exact opposite of what a working board, nonprofit board requires. If you have a larger board with a dedicated staff, it does give you more board-like experience, but it's always very mission-driven and not necessarily the same type of thing as if you're with a for-profit organization. And then there are what I consider to be the mega boards, where the people who are on it specifically for fundraising, like the symphony, the ballet, hospitals, the orchestra. That's not going to give you real board experience. However, the other people who are on the boards with you are probably on for-profit boards, or they're CEOs of larger companies that need board members. And so it really could help you make connections, but only if they see you in action. If you're one of 40 people on a hospital board and you show up to quarterly meetings and you sit there and maybe ask a question, that's not demonstrating to your fellow board members that you are actually a value add board member. So it's not a panacea. It's not, I don't believe it's necessarily indicative of what for-profit board service is like. So at the end of the day, if you believe in the mission, serve on the board because you're helping the organization and you're helping humanity. You may or may not help yourself on your board journey.
Michelle, can I just add something to what Marla said? I do agree that not-for-profit boards are not all alike, and they have a broad spectrum that they cover. At the library, our board size is 42. So as Marla said, you're not going to necessarily, dig in when you're only meeting periodically and you don't have a chance to show what you can contribute. However, the board committees are where that happens. So if you're on the audit committee here, because we have several CEOs that are on our board, you could make connections here if you played a pivotal role on the audit committee or the comp committee, which are real working committees. But let me also say this, while I don't think you can necessarily bank on that happening, no pun intended, Michelle Banks, I do believe a few boards that I served on really prepared me for what happens when it comes to board dynamic. And that's a big deal because you want to be collegial with the board that you join. And that's not always easy to do when you've got a broad spectrum of people that are at the table. So I learned some tough lessons from some not-for-profit boards that I served on that I think I have taken with me to my for-profit boards.
Thanks, Michelle. And I have a similar question for you about advisory boards. I hear paid placement services, telling people that they can get them onto advisory boards and that that's a good stepping stone to serving on a corporate fiduciary board. Did you serve on a corporate advisory board before your first corporate fiduciary board and, use that experience to build your resume? And what do you think are the pros and cons of whether people should do that or not?
Again, it's going to be very driven by what that board has been put together to do. Sometimes they're put together to handle an uproar in the community. Sometimes they've got issues with products, you name it. And so all advisory boards are not equal. But I think you need to be very judicious because you don't have that much extra time in your life. Most people don't when they're playing at this level. And certainly you want to pick wisely. I have never served on an advisory board before I got on my fiduciary boards. I'm on an advisory board now of a tech startup. It is very different from a fiduciary board. I mean, it is night and day to me. So I don't think you can answer that question with one answer which says, of course you should do it. It very much will depend, and we're going to come back to something that I think is true no matter what we're talking about. Do your due diligence and figure it out.
I totally agree with everything Michelle just said. I'm serving on an advisory board now, and what they rely upon me for is really very, very different from what my for-profit boards and my nonprofit boards, for that matter, rely on me for. So it's eye-opening, it's interesting. What it's doing is it's giving me insight and experience in an industry that I wouldn't otherwise learn. And so that's really very helpful. And so in the long run, theoretically, it could make me a more attractive candidate to other boards because of the industry experience I'm garnering from my work on the advisory board.
That makes sense. Abby, you worked for one of the major board search firms, and you still play a role in board search today, although BoardSpan has a lot of other client offerings. How big of a role do you believe professional search firms play in corporate board recruiting? And what advice do you have for people who are interested in making effective connections with board recruiters?
Sure, yeah. So, professional recruiters can be helpful if they happen to be leading a search that fits your profile. But it's really important to remember that they always work for the company, and it's really not in their business model to spend time with people that they can't place. And sadly, if they might be able to place you in a couple of years, but if they can't place you on the project they're working on in the near term, they're unfortunately probably not going to have time. The last thing they need is another cup of coffee that somebody wants to buy them. So the important thing that I want to point out to everybody is that 85% of board seats come through networks, not through intermediaries. Okay, 85%. So that tells us you should think about putting 6 times as much effort into building your own network as into networking with the recruiters. And besides, I want to point out other good things come from your building that network besides, whether somebody can help you on your path to the boardroom. There's a lot of other value that comes out of that networking as well. So that's kind of icing on the cake. And I don't mean to disparage recruiters. I just want to be honest, it's not going to yield the same returns on the time you invest in that. I also want to pick up on the other point about advisory boards and nonprofit boards. I couldn't agree more with Michelle and Marla's comments about the value and the selectivity and being driven to do it because of, you're passionate about what they do. You'll learn something. You might meet some great people. But from the recruiter perspective, there is sometimes a dismissiveness around that. It's a little unfair. And it might be on you to point out why this advisory board or nonprofit board really is relevant, but you're not going to get a lot of cred for those boards if a recruiter wants an experienced board member for a corporate opportunity.
That's helpful. I appreciate hearing both sides of that. Marla already mentioned industry experience. Michelle, I'm going to ask you a two-part question since she already sort of broached this topic. What are your thoughts on establishing yourself, or as somebody's trying to get on a board? Does it make sense to try to establish yourself as an industry thought leader? And then also, I would love for you to tell us, how did you first get into a corporate boardroom? How did you make that happen?
I think everything that we talk about this afternoon is going to start with it depends. Because at the end of the day, sometimes the board search is looking for a subject matter expert. So if you look at the board I'm on today, which is GoGo, they definitely wanted, and I chair the nominating and governance committee, so trust me, I know what they're looking for. And they're looking for people with satellite experience. Well, a lot of people don't walk around with that in their hip pocket. And so that wasn't what they were looking for when I came on the board, which was 4 years ago. But at right this moment, we would tell you satellite experience. So I think you have to know what is happening in that company and what the needs are, which is what everybody has keep saying to you, because you can then determine, are you going to hit the sweet spot? Because it just depends on what point they're on this continuum as to whether they're looking for someone with industry specific experience or someone who is good at risk assessment and, let's say, governance, which is what they looked at me for. That's very different than satellite experience. Need I say more? So coming back to your other question, which is, when did I first get any experience? So I'm going to start with a really small experience, but then I want to leverage it to where I think it really made a difference. So in my first company, because I was over worldwide litigation, I unfortunately would find myself in the boardroom to explain why we had to pay out millions of dollars. That is not a good place to be, because people they don't usually roll out the carpet to say, come tell us where we screwed up. But I did find myself in the boardroom because we had bet the company litigation that we had to get the board involved to write the check. Most CEOs and board members, while they understand that mistakes happen, that's not where they make their biggest impact. I think anybody who knows how business works knows that. Where I got my more in-depth experience was at Colgate-Palmolive, because I was chair of what would now be called the compensation committee. And that was fascinating, particularly because we were dealing with succession planning. That's where I got to see, as people will say, what really happens when the door is closed. And I would say that was my first entree to see how these board members managed some tough issues when it came to talent.
So hold on for a minute, 1L. You said you were chair of the comp committee. I think you probably were secretary.
I meant secretary. I misspoke. That's another time. So I was
You're just used to having all the power.
I was secretary to the comp committee at Colgate-Palmolive. I'm glad you corrected me.
But I think that's a great thing. A way that people can build board experience and board connections is volunteer to be the secretary of any board committee that you can come up with.
Well, and by the way, I asked, didn't wait for the invitation. I went to this general counsel and I said, can I get on one of these committees as a secretary? And he kind of looked at me. I said, well, give it some thought. And he did, and he gave me comp.
Probably the last one you thought you would get.
Go ahead, Michelle.
Oh, I was just going to say, probably the last one you thought you would get.
I don't know about all that. But what I would say, notice what you've heard from Abby, what you've heard from Marla. Don't let people guess what you want. Tell them.
And I would like to add to that, Michelle, if I could just add to that point, because you're really driving home a super important point, which is not only don't make them guess, but tell them what you are good at. And remember, you're all very accomplished attorneys, or you wouldn't be part of this program, but you're more than that. And that's not to take away from the value of being an attorney. You are business leaders. You've seen a lot, whether it's in litigation or in securities matters or cyber issues, et cetera. Bring all of that to bear, all of that business experience, the leadership experience, the people experience, et cetera. because that's what a good board member does. They're a tapestry of all these different experiences. They're not looking to add you to be another lawyer sitting around the table or general counsel. They would hire your firm for that. What they're looking for in a board member is somebody who really integrates all those experiences. And don't be shy about your ability to do that.
And I think what Abby's talking about goes to what is your value proposition, or if you can call it your brand. I'm going to think of it more as your value proposition. Why would a board be better with you on it? It's not because you are an excellent attorney, because they have a general counsel and you're not going to be giving legal advice. You may be a really excellent and experienced international deal maker and negotiator. It's the international experience and it's your negotiation capability. Or you've had a lot of experience with investigations and dealing with government regulators. That experience will be brought to bear, not the fact that you were general counsel or deputy general counsel.
In fact, you almost want to abolish the word lawyer from your tongue when you're talking about your value.
I completely agree.
So Marla, that's a good segue to talking a little bit about the Direct Women Board Institute. You've been through the program. What do you recommend if someone is interested in that program, and what value do you see from it?
So I think there's a lot of value that Direct Women program brings to the participants. It is not a guarantee of getting on a board, and they're not a placement agency that will present on a silver platter board opportunities for you. What Direct Women does do, I think, are two very, very important things. Number one, it gives you the opportunity to meet other really fabulous, accomplished women, add them to your network, and you may not otherwise have known them. I believe 30% of the people who have gone through the Direct Women Institute are now serving on public company boards or for-profit boards. Very accomplished people with the same goal of getting on a board. And so that's adding to your network. And if you take nothing else away from this hour with us, it's all about networking. Who's in your network? What do they know about you? Networking, networking, networking. So that's number one that Direct Women does. The second thing that Direct Women does is that it gives you the opportunity to really step back and think about, do I want to be on a board? What does it mean? It's not the right thing for everybody. And many people get, oh, you'd be great on a board. Well, not everybody is great on a board, and not everybody has the risk profile to feel comfortable with board service. Direct Women gives you the opportunity to think about yourself, learn what it's going to be like to be on a board, what do boards expect, and what do you need to do to get yourself in harm's way of being considered for board service.
So Abby, both Michelle and Marla have hinted at what I'd like to ask you about, which is that not all network connections are created equal. When it comes to getting on a corporate board, you need a CEO, a CFO, you need certain folks to be in your network. So could you talk a little bit about tips for how do you get the right people into your board network?
Yeah, and I would add to the cohort of CEO, CFO, frankly, all board members, whether they're a board chair, head of a non-gov committee, or sitting somewhere else on a board. The reason is because anytime someone comes in well referred, it's a huge plus. At the most basic level, two things matter when filling a board seat. One is, does the person have that specific expertise that we're trying to address for the issues that are coming up or that we're facing, and Michelle talked about it earlier, and I think all three of us have talked about sort of your superpowers and owning them. But the second part is, very simply, is this person a fit? And fit really, really matters. you know, what's key to know is that people are looking for new ways to understand fit, right? In the old days, it used to be, does he look like me? Does he belong to my golf club? Thankfully, that is far behind us and not how we measure fit anymore. But it's still fair to ask, is this the kind of person that I want to go through a challenge with, that I want to spend time strategizing with and working through whether they're hard problems or big opportunities. So when somebody is already known to somebody else on the board or the CEO or somebody else who's credible, they can vouch for you. And that removes a real barrier to the risk of the unknown, which is often the scariest part of the board search. You know, looks great on paper, had a good 1-hour interview. How do I know we're going to get through the hairy, audacious times together? Well, you know, Marla has worked with this person in the past and can vouch for her. That's a big plus. So that's why those relationships are so important.
That's a great segue to what I would like to have Michelle and then Marla talk about, which is, I find that some people, even general counsel, are a bit intimidated to leverage their own corporate board in their personal board search. So I would love to hear about whether you leveraged your company's or organization's board members and what role they played in you obtaining your boards.
So I can't say that I leveraged, no, I can't say that I leveraged my board members in the prior company that I was in. However, just let me augment that a wee bit. So the board that I joined, as I said, GoGo. When I looked at, again, doing my homework, reading the 10Q, the 10K, you know, you name it, and who was the board chair but a former board member of the last company I was on at Allstate. And believe it or not, he didn't even ask to interview me. I thought, oh, you know, he's seeing me as the company secretary, but that's different. You know, I was in the boardroom for every single meeting, but he wasn't particularly loquacious. But he's terribly different as board chair now. You would not even think he's the same individual. But my point here, he was clearly watching me, because when my name came up to join the board and I said, well, I assume I need to meet the board chair. And they said, no, he knows who you are. And so I literally leapt over that requirement and simply met with the other folks on the board. So I didn't leverage it, but I do tell you this, I did leverage my CEO. That is the one person that I leverage. He knew from the very beginning that I was interested in joining a board and actually used his influences to open doors for me. And that made a big difference.
My experience was a little bit different than Michelle's, because the first public company board I joined, I think it was 18 years ago now, I was working at Baxter International. I was deputy general counsel. I wasn't general counsel. And 2 Baxter board members were on the board of this other company, and they needed another board member. And so they were advocates for me for that board. And I hadn't even gone to them and said, oh, I'd really like to be on a board. They just knew me because of board presentations, and I had been the corporate secretary for one of the committees that they both happened to serve on for Baxter. So they knew me, they saw me in action. Since that time, that taught me a really important lesson, and that was to talk to the board members, to make sure that they know you as a person, not just as a lawyer servicing the board or a corporate secretary. And most board members are on more than one board, and they will be advocates for you, assuming they like you and they trust you. But also certain boards will ask for references. And Michelle clearly could use her CEO as a reference. I could have used my CEO, but I have been using people who were board members of prior boards that I've served on and I've worked for as references, because they're part of the club and they know what it takes to be an effective board member.
I think Marla did it the right way. I got there by hook or crook. I think she did it more strategically.
Even a blind squirrel gets a nut every once in a while.
So, Abby, let's talk about, if you're not a corporate lawyer necessarily, what can you do, to position yourself for board service? And one of the things that comes to mind for me is you can do research. You can figure out industries that you have experience in, companies that you want to target. How do you go about doing that research or recommending people do it? And how early do they need to do it?
Yeah, so I think it's really important, just to sort of give the headline on this one. I think the timing has a lot to do with A, how much time you have on your hands, and B, how close you are to that opportunity. But it's important for two reasons. One is you want to know what you might be getting yourself into. Marla used the expression putting yourself in harm's way earlier, and it made me smile. Hopefully it's not all about that, but there's certainly an underlying message of you are accountable, you are responsible. So you want to know what you'd be getting yourself into. The other reason is so that you can put your best foot forward in presenting yourself. And one thing I want to remind people is that every meeting or casual conversation is an interview of sorts, even if it's not positioned that way. So as far as timing, you're going to approach somebody to ask for help in a certain space or with a very specific company. It makes sense to do a little bit of homework and understand what's going on at that company. What are generally, how has the stock been performing over the last year or so? What's going on in their industry? If they're a private company, you can look at some of their peers. You don't have to spend a lot of time with all the resources available to us online. It doesn't take a lot of time to do some high-level research, just so that you can be fluid enough in the conversation of sort of what the key issues are. I'm not saying memorize the 10K, just to be really clear. I'm saying, give yourself a little bit of a primer. It's worth 10 or 15 minutes to understand sort of what the dynamics are, and to have good questions, and to make a few interesting observations. That kind of preparation is immensely valuable, even in the early days of networking. Once you're lined up for an interview, yes, do go ahead and read the last investor presentation. Take a quick look at the 10K, maybe even the proxy, because the more that you understand the issues, the problems they're trying to solve, the challenges they're trying to embrace, and who the other people are, the better job you're going to do explaining how you are incremental value added and contribute to that conversation. The more it's a little bit of a visioning exercise. Can they envision you sitting around the table with them? That homework will go a long way to help make that case.
So unfortunately, I can't see if the audience has questions. So in a minute, I am going to ask Kelsey to play the role of moderator with the questions. So I'm going to let you all know that in case you want to submit questions. And I also want to assure you, if you've stayed with us this long, that we are going to turn to your questions next. Before that, I would love for each of you, Marla, Abby, and Michelle, to take just 30 seconds to talk about what's different in the pandemic. We're all working remotely this year. Is that a pro or a con? Have you done anything different when it comes to networking? And do you see this as an opportunity potentially for people who want to start connecting towards future board service as a goal?
I think there is an opportunity here. It's very hard to reach out to create new relationships with somebody that you haven't known before. But for people who you have known, like those board members who you may not stay in touch with regularly, or past CEOs of companies you've worked for, to reach out and connect, because people are responding to connection at a personal level, or to even reach out to see how companies are doing. It's not how are you and your family doing, but I see that, you're still on the board of X. How's that going? I, just read an article about it. You can share information, share resources, and take advantage of the more personal outreach that you can do either by phone, by email, or by a virtual like Zoom or some other video capabilities, which provides a greater opportunity for personal interaction. In fact, some ways greater than if you attend to see a continuing board education with 500 other people there and you're jammed into little cocktail parties. So take advantage of it, but you have to reach out, and it's not a one and done. It's not, well, I've sent that person an email, can scratch him off the list. It is networking 101, adding value to a relationship and keeping it going.
Yeah, I don't disagree with Marla at all. And it's very curious. What I've noticed is that while everybody is living in this alternative universe that we didn't elect to live in, some people are actually easier to get to now because they're not traveling. And so they have a little more capacity. And as long as you're not abusing it and being respectful of their time, I think they're more than willing to say, oh, you're still looking for that board, yep, I'm still looking, just wanted you to know, here's my updated, board resume. Let me tell you a little bit what's going on here. Just keep me in mind, and it was great talking to you. I don't think you have to have, an hour-long conversation. It can be 15 minutes. And I think that means you're on that person's radar screen and they appreciate that you didn't hog their time, but you made them know I'm in the market.
So I'm going to ditto both what Marla and Michelle said, and my advice for a post-pandemic world doesn't change, what I call the post-vaccine world. I think this carries over. We've all learned these new stupid pet tricks, or actually smart pet tricks, right? And how to use phone, video, and email. Know when to use which medium, which is appropriate, respect people's time. If a coffee date truly is appropriate and you're still, working primarily by phone and video, then position it as a coffee date and bring your coffee. But you probably can do it in a half hour instead of an hour because you don't have to travel to get to that Starbucks. If it's a networking outreach that you're making or a request for help, be very genuine about that. Don't sneak it in as, I'm here to talk about this, and then drop the bomb that you want their help. Just be authentic, because ultimately that's what everybody wants. I think that one of the maybe silver linings or lemonades that come out of this experience that we've all gone through together is this new level of authenticity that I think people really value and appreciate. I believe in my heart that humans really do want to help each other, and we're looking for ways. So if you give somebody a way to help you and it's respectful and authentic, odds are pretty high you're going to get that help.
That's a great segue. So Kelsey, let's help some folks. Let's answer their questions.
Thanks, Michelle. So really quickly, as a reminder, to ask any of our panelists a question, please use the GoToWebinar console, which is at the top right side of your screen. Just open the console and hit submit. So we have a slew of questions that have already come in. One that I've actually gotten multiple times here while we've been on the phone in various forms is, what are some good questions to ask in the board interview? And to kind of further that, how does one prepare for an interview for either a privately held company, publicly held company, or even a company owned by a private equity firm?
So why don't we have Marla talk about private and Michelle talk about public?
Sure. Private is harder, obviously, because you can't go to the SEC and get the information, but Google is your friend. And whatever search engine that you like, find out as much as you can about the company, going back news reports even as far as 10 years ago. If most companies have press releases, you'll be able to find those, because what you want to do is find out about the business and how the business has evolved, as well as much as you can find out about the management team and the other people who are on the board. And if you want to, what are good questions to ask? I think a very safe question, and one that I personally would want to know the answer to before I said yes to serving on a board, is, can you explain the relationship between the board and management? And how much interaction do you have with people other than the CEO at the company as a board member? And this is when you're interviewing with other board members. When you're talking to the CEO, we'll be asking the CEO, what do you rely on the board for most? I would want to find out, how people I'm interviewing with would talk about the board and the board's interactions. I personally want to work, I don't want to work on a board. I don't want to serve on a board where the members are fighting and there are various camps. So you need, keep in mind, please, that you are interviewing the company as much as the company and the board is interviewing you, because being on a dysfunctional board in a very difficult company situation may not be everybody's cup of tea.
And I don't think the questions would vary a great deal, even if you're looking at a public company board. One thing is absolutely true. The amount of information is almost overwhelming that's available to you. So you really do need to be judicious where you're going to get the most value out of things. And I would refer you to looking at industry rags that are talking about competitors and what competitors are doing better, which ones are doing worse, and where the ranking is. I think that's extremely important to understand. I'd also tell you to look at the risk factors, but you want to ask, what risk are you most concerned about? Because what you see in the risk factors is frequently a laundry list. And what you really want to know from the CEO, which ones keep you up at night? Because those are the ones where the board is going to be spending the majority of its time. The other question I would ask is, what is most likely to disrupt this business? Because that's another, it's a risk factor, but it's a different type of risk factor because it's one where you've got to see around corners. So those are the things that I would add to what Marla has already identified. And let me just say one more thing. Do spend a lot of time, as much as you can, because this is really difficult to get your arms around, trying to assess if the board is working well together. And I'm not sure if there's a golden way to do that, a golden bullet that says, yes, if they answer this question, you'll know they're working smoothly. Because there is nothing more disheartening than if you have a board that has camps or tribes on it, because then you're not spending time helping the company, you're spending more time watching your back, and that is very unproductive.
Michelle, if I could jump in with just one comment, because I'm inspired by what Marla and Michelle just said. Which is, it is important to understand all those issues and do your diligence, so to speak, but especially because you'll all be coming at this as attorneys, it's not all just about the risk assessment, and you want to be careful that you are also asking questions around what does management see as their biggest opportunities, what's most exciting, what's the vision for the company, where are they on that journey? What works well in the boardroom. And my advice is, balance out your questions. Don't go into an interview with a dozen questions. By the way, you'll have plenty of time to ask them along the way and ask different people different questions. But if you have 4 or 5 questions that you're going to try to get to, try to make them a little bit balanced, because it is important that they see your open-mindedness and your enthusiasm, as at the same time they're seeing your critical thinking skills. You're still figuring out what they're looking for, and don't worry about losing the opportunity to do that due diligence throughout the process.
And
Abby's trying to.
You know what I would say is that if you can weave into your answer how your skills are going to play into whatever the opportunities are or the risks are. That to me is nirvana.
And especially if you're interviewing to join, a VC-backed or a private equity-backed company, some of the people you will be interviewing with are the VCs, obviously, and not even necessarily board members from the VCs, but you want to understand and ask about what's the goal? Is this to pretty the company up for somebody to acquire? Is it to go for an IPO? Is it to do a management leveraged buyout? You want to demonstrate that you understand the pond in which the company is swimming, and that you're not going to treat it, if you are a board member, the same way you would treat a publicly traded company, because the goals of the owners, shareholders, are very different.
Kelsey, let's try to at least answer one more question. That was great information.
Sounds great. So another popular one has been, how do lawyers get over the objection that lawyers are not good for corporate boards?
Well, I don't necessarily think people who have worked with very business-friendly general counsel and other lawyers don't necessarily come with the attitude that, oh, lawyers are bad on boards. What they don't want is somebody who's so risk adverse, because business is all about risk, that they are going to be a blocker. So I think what's really important is you're presenting yourself as a business savvy individual who has financial acumen. You don't have to be a financial expert, but has financial acumen, business knowledge, understands the environment, the customers, the competitors. And so you talk that way, and not so much focusing in on, risk, or what's your insurance for the directors look like. If you're going to ask questions that highlight risk aversion, you're not going to be the type of director that they want to join the organization. You have to be able to recognize and balance and deal with risk, but not be afraid of it.
One more, Kelsey, and then I think we're going to have to sign off.
Sounds great. So another question was, someone wanted to know if any of our panelists have advice or suggestions about gaining financial acumen.
A lot of the companies that folks work for, well, certainly you can look at the accounting courses at PLI. I think that's really important. But just getting accustomed to reading the financial statements, the P&L, just really, and asking questions. And more importantly, there are very often times courses within our own companies. There was always a course going on in our own company that you could take. So it's just diving in and getting a good enough comfort level. Again, you're not going to become a CPA. Forget about it. If you are, then you don't need the course. But you can get comfortable enough to spot the areas where you most need to focus.
Most business schools have a 3-day or a 5-day course for, finance for non-finance professionals.
Exactly.
And KPMG and the other big accounting firms do things similarly. So if KPMG, I'm not plugging KPMG, but as an example, if KPMG is the auditors for your company, talk to your audit partner and say, I'd really like to get invited to your next set of classes for finance for non-finance professionals. That's how you're going to get your feet wet, and then sit down with the finance people in your company and ask them questions. The difference between management finance versus accounting finance, and what's important for measuring at our company. So that start where you are to make sure that you understand what the finances mean and how they are counted, and that will help you glean the right type of questions to ask when you are interviewing at other companies.
And Michelle and Kelsey, I would like to tie back this question to the one right before that Marla answered about positioning yourself, whether it's enough finance to speak intelligently, not necessarily chair of the audit committee, but enough to be as intelligent as your peers. I would encourage everybody to pick just 2 or 3 role model people and ask yourself, what do they bring to the board? And I have a bias because I'm fortunate to have her on my board, but the person I love to point out is Mary Cranston, who many of you know. And Mary's just a great example. She was an incredibly accomplished attorney for all of her career. When she finally left Pillsbury and started going on boards, I guarantee they didn't put her on the board because she's a terrific attorney. They put her on the board for her wisdom. And she now chairs the Audit and Risk Committee at Visa. Okay, she chairs the Audit Committee, and she was never a CPA. So it's an example of, if you look at her and Stacia Kelly and the people on this call, my fellow panelists and moderator, look at what they've done to sort of what they bring to a board, and create your own story that's similar to them. You know, sort of what's my Michelle or Marla story, or my Mary or Stacia's story, because that story about who you are and what you bring to a board is really what's going to get you on the board.
Well, that's a good segue to my just wanting to thank you. Thank you, Abby. Thank you, Marla. Thank you, Michelle, for taking time to be with us, sharing your wisdom. Thank you to all the audience for listening, and we hope you'll join us for our upcoming virtual events. The new normal of Global Corporate Board membership is on November 17th, and we will have a power chat with Direct Women honoree Paula Boggs, one of many of our favorite lawyers, on December 9th. You can see links to these free programs in the follow-up email you'll receive, and you can also find links to registration on directwomen.org. Please take just 2 minutes at the end of the webinar to provide your feedback. I promise you, Kelsey and I have written an extremely brief survey that will launch automatically at the end of the live program. We would love to hear your feedback. We would love to do better next time. Farewell, and please take care, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us.